Green Warriors descend on dirt country. This week on Dirt.
The glory days live on. In this Hall of Fame year, tradition continues. The torch has been passed. A new generation, born in the dust of these pioneers, challenges the unknown. The mountains are high, the valleys so low, but the flame burns brightly. Postcards from the past instill greatness as yesterday's dreamers become today's heroes. Now, for the 15th year, Drivers Independent Racetracks proudly present This Week on Dirt.
Hello once again, everybody. Welcome to This Week on Dirt. My name is Doug Logan, and joining me, the senior editor of Stock Car Racing magazine, Andy Fusco. And Andy, we were hoping and praying for a great Memorial Day weekend of racing, and we got it.
Well, the weather was a little chilly, but the racing was hot. Dave Lape is on fire at Weedsport. At Canandaigua, 7 lead changes in the feature, and 3 sprint car organizations descend on New York State in little over 1 week.
When they said Cayuga County Fair Speedway was the new Weedsport Speedway, they were right on target. Check out this action from Memorial Day weekend.
The Cayuga County Fair Speedway has always been known as a track that was tough to pass on, usually only 1 lane to run on. However, things have changed. Over the winter, not only was the track resurfaced, it was completely reshaped. And on this Memorial Day weekend, the modified Sportsman and URC sprints would take to the new high banks at Cayuga County. Early on during qualifying heat action, it was obvious there was both an inside and an outside group available to drive on. And in the first qualifying heat race, Joe Plazek used the middle lane on the racetrack to take the victory.
I think it's probably going to slick over in the groove, but there's going to be a real good cushion, and I don't know, there's probably going to be two real good lanes, I think.
Joe's words would prove to be very accurate. In the next qualifying heat, drivers were using every inch of the racetrack to move forward. Now here, Pat Ward tries the middle group. Alan Johnson puts his car, the white 14J, right down on the bottom of the racetrack to move into second behind Bob McCready. Then Billy Decker in the Wheels 91 also uses the inside. While they were using the inside, Bob McCready in the Orange Kinney Drugs Car 9 used the outside to take the heat victory. In the next qualifying heat, some great side-by-side racing. The track surface not only had a couple of lanes available, it was very tacky. So the drivers were getting a lot of bite coming off the corners. Some very fast laps were being turned. Mitch Gibbs went on to take the victory in this heat.
Well, if the outside groove stays smooth and there's a decent cushion, we'll run outside. Because like last week when there's a high brim up there, we'll have to run down low.
Come feature time, Marty Conlon in the Stone Travel 36 had Bob McCready as his dancing partner on the front row as the field took the green flag for this 35-lap modified feature contest. Immediately, McCready jumped up high, while in the back of the pack, some drivers had some trouble with a little bumper car action down low. Now, this incident not only took out Gary Tompkins in car number 32, it also took out Danny Johnson, who had a flat right front tire on the Freightliner car number 6. He'd go back to the pit area and make it back out without losing a lap. When the green flag came back out, Marty Conlon slipped up into the front spot, followed by McCready and Joe Plazek. Meanwhile, further back in the field, Steve Payne in the yellow 7X was trying to work his way forward when, whoops, going into turn number 1, the car slides out from underneath him. Payne would not be a factor the rest of the race. On the restart, McCready easily got by Conlon, as did Dave Lape in the Black Burroughs number 22 car. They were followed by Jeff Trombley and Joe Plazek, who was staying up towards the front. In the middle of the pack, real tight racing action, drivers using both lanes, especially Danny Johnson, who was using any lane he could find to get up towards the front of the pack as quickly as possible. McCready continued to set the pace, followed by Lape in second. Lape was running the inside group right down against the inside retaining wall, and he started to close the gap on McCready as the laps started to tick away. Then coming into traffic, McCready, blocked by the 8 car of J.R. Krause, has to drop low, but too late. Dave has already gotten underneath him. They battled side by side for several laps until, with just a lap to go, McCready caught a rut and cut the left rear tire, and he was out of the running. It would be a 1-lap dash to the finish, with Dr. J, Danny Johnson, sitting behind Lape on this last lap restart. On the final lap, Danny tried to go as high as he could, as fast as he could, but he ran out of time, and Dave Lape took the feature event victory. Dave, congratulations, 2 for 2 at Cayuga County.
Thanks a lot. The track was real good. There's 2 grooves. The car was working great.
And once again, you didn't venture upstairs.
No, not at all.
The last 8 ball. The late Jim Champagne was a member of the United Racing Club back in 1980, 1981, and 1982. This car was the car that he used in those sprint car wars. Well, URC returned to dirt country this weekend. Here's Paul Small with the report.
Memorial Day weekend is a traditional stop for the URC sprints at the Cayuga County Fair Speedway. This time around, Dave Mago is the points leader coming in.
Yeah, the track's completely different this year. Last year it was slick, kind of hard. This year it's really soft and tacky, and it's really hard to keep the cars down onto the track. They want to do wheelies all the time.
And that produced some exciting racing. Midge Miller took the early lead in this event with a number of top competitors, including Bruce Thompson and Glenn Clark, moving their way through the field in a hurry. Mago is buried in the back of the pack in car 669. He would ultimately finish in the number 6 position on this night. Up front, a wild battle. Midge Miller in the 5 versus the 54 of Glenn Clark. Clark last won in 1988 right here at Cayuga County. He makes a great outside move going into turn number 3 to take the number 1 spot, while the 28 of Kramer Williamson gets by Miller and the 14 of Bruce Thompson coming around turn 4 to go all the way up into the number 2 position, and that's the way they'd stay at the finish. Clark the winner. Kramer Williamson comes across 4 car lengths back in second.
Well, it's a whole different racetrack, and running with URC, you run a lot of different tracks, different conditions, dry, tacky, slick, all different racetracks, and it's a whole new ball game every time we come out.
Well, if that Weedsport action reminds you of the great racing we see from Canandaigua each week, there's a reason. That's where Glenn Donnelly got the clay.
And we'll take you to Canandaigua after a look at some weekend winners. Stay with us.
4 nights, 4 super shows featuring the winged warriors of the world of outlaws. Will the king reign supreme? Will Slim and Sammy steal the throne? Don't miss the fastest 4 wheels on dirt as they light up the Empire State, taking no prisoners. It's the Battle of New York as the
50s, the transmission in all modifieds was exactly like the transmission in your family car. Well, a lot has changed since then. Here's Jeff Trombley with our Sunoco High Performance Report.
This week's Sunoco High Performance Report, we're going to talk to you a little bit about the transmission use in a dirt modified. Basically, the transmission we use is a 2-speed standard transmission. The automatic transmission was tried a few years ago, but it proved to be awful unreliable. Although we do use a standard transmission, we don't actually do much shifting out on the racetrack. The transmission has a low speed to get you up to racing speed, and then we use a high gear, which is direct drive, to get us going. There's a number of different manufacturers that make the transmissions that we use. Although Burt transmission is the most popular. It takes a very special transmission to hold up under 700 horsepower and put it to the ground. For this week's Sunoco High Performance Report, driver of the Altair Audio 21J, I'm Jeff Trombley.
We've all heard of the legendary ride of Paul Revere. Well, now it's time to go to Canandaigua and a couple of legendary rides, won by Mark Hawkins, and let's not forget Steve Payne.
Saturday night at the Land of Legends, the Canandaigua Speedway. It was the 50-lap Dennis Taney Memorial for the modifieds, and what it was one heck of an exciting race. In the early going, drivers were moving forward very quickly. Look at AJ Slideways, Ellen Johnson and the LaFoy 14J taking 3 cars in turn number 2. He then caught up to leader Gil Tegg. Tegg on the outside in the black 22. Johnson on the inside, down the front stretch. Johnson shuts him down and goes into the number 1 spot. Then this wild wreck, Greg Hickson in the 1S gets hit, and the 105 of Mark Hawkins does a barrel roll in turn number 1. A number of cars were involved. Many of the cars sustained some pretty heavy damage. Hawkins was helped out of his car, but got to his feet, and he was okay. Some of the other drivers involved examining the damage. You can see Steve Ledd's 88 caught in this wreck, along with the 52 of Bob Northrup. Now, here's what happened in slow motion. Greg Hickson's car slowed down. He was tagged by the Jeffrey 24. Then by Art McDonald's 100, you see Ledd's 88 getting rear-ended by Northrup. He piled into Hickson as Hawkins had Eldon Jensen's 81J go over the front end of his car. That sent him rolling. He wound up landing on his roof. When the green flag came back out after a brief red flag period, Alan Johnson moved into the number 1 spot with Payne following close behind. Payne then went up to his homeland at Canandaigua with the outside groove known as the Payne lane. He used that to go to the #1 spot, relegating A.J. Slideways to #2. On this restart, though, Johnson got the best of him. Payne dropped back to second, and behind Payne, fast company. Bob McCready in the Kinney Drugs car #9 and the Canadian #1 of Joe Plozek. McCready would get up into the #2 spot. Allen would jump down to the low groove, and McCready would go up in the Payne lane to try to take the victory on this night. Lap after lap, they charged each other and battled until McCready tagged Darrell Welty's lap car going into turn 3, and that was it for the Kinney Drugs car #9. Some great racing was going on in the middle of the pack as well, especially with a man who's not too familiar with the land of legends. Pete Bignell in car #42, the defending Mr. Dirt Small Block champion, made an appearance on this night and garnered a top 10 finish. The action was up front, however, as the lead battle raged on in the closing laps as Steve Payne went back up the Payne lane to go up into the #1 spot, and at the end of the race, Steve Payne was in the spotlight.
The Fuji Points picture spotlights the small block tracks. We'll start at Orange County, where leading the way is Danny Johnson, followed by Steve Dodd.
At Can-Am, only one race
In the world of outlaws can be. Let's take a look at this.
We all know that Doug Wolfgang is sidelined with injuries this year and not racing the Outlaws. But remember when we asked him last year who the greatest race driver in America was? He said it was this man, Steve Kinser, the king of the Outlaws. Now, some people think that Slammin' Sammy Swindell is the king, but not in New York State. Whenever the Outlaws come to the Empire State, there's no question. Steve Kinser is the emperor of the Empire State. Let's not belabor ancient history. Let's go to the most recent outlaw race in New York, October 1991, Syracuse.
Oh, the race is underway before the green flag flutters. Here comes the field at 38 strong, thundering down the front straightaway, streaming into the number. We have a problem in the middle of the field. It's Glenn Fitzgerald. Wow, was he lucky. Here's what it looked like, the attempt to start race #2. Once again, Swindell bolts out in front, Kinser riding herd right behind him, and then Stevie Smith Jr. gets in trouble halfway down the front straightaway. He is belted by at least 2 cars. It looked very serious at first. As you saw, Smith was struck while upside down on the front straightaway. Here's another look at it. There were at least 3 other cars involved in the crash. You'll get a very clear view as to what precipitated the crash. There on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see clearly Dale Blaney is moved over by a 3rd car, striking Stevie Smith, who spins completely around, out of control, out of power. Boom! Right in front of Johnny Byrosh, the car pirouettes, gets up on its side, clipped by a 4th car, and then is drilled by Glenn Fitzgerald. The tail of Stevie Smith's car going right inside of Fitzgerald's cockpit.
And here's what happened after that initial impact with Smith. Johnny Byrosh hits him, slides down to the inside. John Jenkins catches him right into the side of the cockpit. Mal Lane barely escapes on the inside. Then Mike Thomas piles in and makes it 3 cars right down here on the inside of the racetrack.
Watch what happens to Dale Blaney now. He'll come scurrying down the front straightaway into corner #1, out of control, hard into the outside wall. Almost an airline-looking crash.
The oil blew out of the headers on the engine, got on top of the hot engine block, starting a small engine fire in the cockpit. When racing resumed after the 2nd red flag of the day, Sammy Swindell picked up where he left off. His car was absolutely untouchable. Steve Kinser was doing a lot of wrestling between lap traffic and his own car, which wasn't handling very well, but he was drawing into the middle stages of the race.
Today's most serious incident right in front of Steve Kinser as he was going through traffic. That's Jerry Dinnan of Bethel, Connecticut. And he's also remembering the specter of 3 previous red flags today. He does not want to become #4, particularly in the final lap. He'll look low, then high, then finally pass these lap cars on the low side as he takes the checkered flag. Our Andy Fusco visited him in Victory Lane.
Yeah, the car, it was the best car I've ever had here. It worked good. I think we could, if we could go back out, we could make it just a touch better, and maybe go a little quicker, but yeah, it's the best car I've ever had here for the race.
It's 1992, and here's the win list in the Outlaws. Kinser on top, then Swindell, and surprise, Stevie Smith Jr. in 3rd place. Moving to the points, Kinser and Smith, and 2 good runners whenever they come to New York State. Dave Blaney and Mark Kinser, Danny Smith in 5th place. Yes, Katie, bar the doors. It was 20 years ago today that Sergeant Pepper taught the band to play, and it was 20 years ago that they last raced at the Watertown Speedway. The Jefferson County Fairgrounds Oval with that huge front straightaway grandstand was home to some great Saturday night racing in the 1950s and 1960s. Some racetracks like Lebanon Valley, Fonda, and Keywood County have a heritage of their own, but for Can-Am, its heritage is Watertown, 17 miles down the road. There's Hall of Fame driver Frank Andre. What an excellent piece of driving to avoid that incident. Andre in the X-Car takes a checkered flag. Other great drivers from the North Country that raced at Watertown include Gary Reddick in the V3, perhaps the most successful North Country driver to ever emerge and win downstate. There's Don June in the 117. He was a great one as well. Racing at the Watertown half mile was always excellent because they had so many grooves of action. They also had a lot of action in the accident department as well. For this week's Hall of Fame flashback at Watertown, I'm Andy Fusco. The Watertown Speedway is still there, Doug. Well, kinda. The races they now host are pennant races. It's a baseball stadium in the New York Penn League.
We're going to take it back, though, to some racing for a black and white checkered flag. Our Weekend Wars coming up right after this final look at some more weekend winners. Largely to the running of the Indianapolis 500. This car paced the Indy cars just a few short years ago. We had great racing on the dirt tracks as well. Time now for our Weekend Wars.
Our war starts Saturday night. The Orange County Fair Speedway, Middletown, New York. Small block action. Yeah, it's Danny Johnson, the Freightliner number 6. He'd won 3 in a row. Could he make it 4? Danny charging up through the field early, but he'd have trouble this particular night from number 1, Brett Hearn. Hearn suddenly hot in the small block division. Could Danny beat him? Stevie Botcher's leading. There's Hearn and Danny side by side for second and third. They charge out of turn 4. Now Danny's gotten by Hearn. He puts a move on Botcher. He get a wheel down deep, and Danny Johnson would go on to victory. His 4th in a row in the small block class at Orange County Fair Speedway. Brett Hearn ends up second. Now it's the nightcap, the big block modifieds. Again, it's DJ versus Hearn. Hearn in the 72, the ADAP car. There's Johnson, the Freightliner number 6. Down the back straightaway, Hearn passes Johnson in your face, DJ. Brett Hearn now goes to the front of the pack. He charges up through. Brett Hearn with a patented inside move in his usual Olsen car. Danny Johnson still in tow. Here he grabs Rich Rickey. Rickey would end up 5th. Mike Rickey would end up 2nd this particular night. But the real story, Frank Cozy in the number 97. He had a big lead, but late in the event, Brett Hearn charges down the inside in the ADAP Auto Palace number 72, and Brett Hearn charges to victory in the big block modified division at the Orange County Fair Speedway. Now the action goes to Paradise Speedway Friday night. This is warm-ups. Tom Tabor, ESS Sprinter, flips over in turn number 2. This was the first ever appearance for the ESS cars at Paradise, the biggest crowd in track history. Now it's feature time. Now the guy to watch here is Mel Lane, the Stone Travel number 5. There he is using the very bottom of the Paradise quarter-mile oval. He gets down into 4th place. Now Mel Lane on the top side of the racetrack. He pulls into 2nd. We're on lap number 12. The leader is Rick Crane, and Mel Lane goes around Crane to take the lead. 4 laps later, this one would be checkered due to all the accidents. 7 flips that night at Paradise. They only ran 16 laps. Now we go to Saturday night action at the Fonda Speedway. The flying school teacher, Johnny Kohler at 10%. He takes the early lead with Ted Lamb right in tow. Kohler would have a challenge right off the bat from none other than A.J. Romano. Romano in the number 16, the McDonald-sponsored car. He'd go outside in turns 1 and 2 all night long. There he is, 3 wide in turn 2. He drives around Lamb. He drives around Pat Ward in the 42, and now he sets his sight on Johnny Kohler in the 10%. Moments later, Romano would pass Kohler and get the lead, and now everyone's attention was in the black number 22, the Fred Burroughs-sponsored number 22 of Dave Lape. Here, Lape goes underneath Kohler. He puts a wheel under Pat Ward. Dave Lape on the move, perhaps the fastest car on the track at Fonda that particular night. Now he goes wide in turns 1 and 2. He loses several positions. He wouldn't be a factor after that. The big story of the night, Jack Johnson. He flips the 12A in turn number 2. Heavy damage. 2 records taken off the speedway. Johnson was done for the entire Memorial Day weekend. From that point on, it was all A.J. Romano, his first Fonda win of the year for the Weekend Wars. I'm Andy Fusco.
If you thought this past